Maybe you've heard in the news there were some engineering issues with airplanes recently. I thought that might be a good time to ask critical engineering questions. Ladies and gentlemen, Justin Bushko. I should say, ladies and gentlemen, author Justin Bushko.
Right. All right, so we're going to talk about some critical engineering questions, typically around medtech startups, developing new products, new product development. If you haven't seen, we've got a pretty big blog. We're pushing stuff out quite a bit, trying to educate people on different topics. So if you're interested, you can always reach out there and connect with us. This is the book that Joe's talking about. So this is now on Amazon. You can go ahead and get a copy whenever you want. I've got some floating around here too. If anybody really has an interest, we can connect the dots there.
The folks want to know, how do they earn one of these MedTech Man poker chips?
That's what business cards. So just come by and say hello. All right, so critical engineering questions for your medtech startup. I found this decision tree, and just recently coming back from Ireland, I like the twist on this one, where it's not just duct tape and WD-40 trying to figure out what's going on, but every time everything goes right, you get to celebrate with a gift.
Don't leave home without it.
Another engineer.
So we've got WD-40, and this one also goes into using a hammer or a JB Weld, which I thought was pretty interesting as well. But going through this tree and understanding just these basic steps is something that you're doing every single day when you're working on a medical device, any kind of an engineering project. So one of the things you have to consider at the very beginning is your idea worthy at all? This is a little thing from Monty Python. I think you guys don't recognize it, but we're looking at targeting what is your product and is it actually worth doing. So the target market, like who's actually going to be using this thing? Is it actually useful? Is it going to address the specific needs of your product or your particular stakeholders? What's that unique value proposition? You're going to find that value prop is critical for everybody, right? It's an internal startup at a big company. You have to defend your stake and make sure that financially you can get your product approved through your steering committee. You're also going to have to do that with your investors, with your board, and everybody else. So you have to have a good value prop and make sure that you're actually addressing an unmet need, because without addressing an unmet need, you're just simply developing a product, maybe trying to solve something. Maybe it's not actually going to do any good in the field anyway. And then you also have to be looking at how's it actually going to be used in the medical device field. Is it actually going to improve something for the doctor, improve something in a case, make the procedure easier, or are there new benefits that people are going to be able to realize in patient outcomes, healthcare providers seeing something different, maybe saving money in the entire system? So whether or not your idea is worthy is really the first question you need to be asking yourself to figure out, do I even want to start this company? Do I want to work on this product at all?
So on the worthy part, you have to have an honest question with yourself.
Louder.
On the worthy part, you need to have an honest question. I had a client, great guy, he did something that was helpful to himself, but nobody else was interested. So I mean, you
Yep.
gotta have some advisors who can kind of challenge you, because when you love your product, it's always gonna be worthy.
Yeah, and actually in the additional questions and stuff that I've got in the book that really kind of pull you to ask more questions from other people and keep your mind open and make sure you're not just taking your own decision, push it forward. So the next thing you got to do is look at how does your idea compare to everybody else. And of course, we all want to be winning.
But not all of us have access to Tiger Bar.
So how does your product or concept differ from existing solutions that are out there? So as you're looking through this, you need to understand what are you actually doing differently? Are you cutting time, or are you improving something in that particular procedure that's going to reduce impact on one aspect of it, or are you improving safety in some way? And are there any other gaps in the current competitive portfolio that you can actually add a feature, change something, maybe nowadays collect data, do whatever else needs to be done in that area. Other industry trends regarding that particular product development, like where are people headed now, what are people addressing, How quickly are some of your competitors coming out with new products? Because if you're getting to the rate too late, it really might not be a good move there. So you need to be aware of what else is going on. And then what other technological advancements are they leveraging? Obviously, we hear at this conference, AI is going to be impacting a lot of stuff. So you should be looking, at least considering, how does that stuff impact your product? And then how thoroughly have you reviewed all these competitive devices? You may look at a brochure or something along those lines and have a pretty good understanding how it might work. But have you seen it being used in procedures? Have you disassembled the product? You really got a good idea of flaws or other features that you want to implement into your product. So really understanding that background of your competitive devices is going to give you a leg up on that next step. So how does your product work on the bench? This one is data from the Goonies. He's always coming up with something that doesn't ever really seem to work, so I thought it was appropriate image here. But what are those critical safety factors and durability requirements for your testing? A lot of people will just create something that they feel is going to work, seems like it's okay, but they don't have safety margins built into the product, right? So looking at early stage requirements on stress and risk of breakage and other aspects of that, as well as durability requirements for how many times it needs to be in an autoclave or how many times it's used in a procedure before something needs to be repaired. Those things need to be addressed early on, or else you'll end up with a prototype that kind of works, that you didn't really ruggedize for actual use. And then sometimes just in that normal typical use conditions, you're going to have what some people call abnormal use, where your surgeon's going to maybe pry on it a little bit differently. You've got to account for those things in your design. If you look for the optimal conditions, you're not going to get to where you need to be. What are the stress levels and worst case scenarios? You also need to be looking at all those things that can go wrong in that design. And then how early in the process do you start testing? Like as soon as you get a product and you have an idea of where you're headed, that particular prototype or maybe a small model could be tested. You could go through those early stage steps to prove that one aspect of your design is actually flawed or needs to be improved. So the earlier you start testing, the better off you are. And then as you get into user testing, these things generate quite a few user related engineering concerns. This one here from Dilbert, just looking at whether or not the user interface works or if they can even figure it out. And that's pretty much what usability is all about in the engineering world here, FDA. So have you actually identified all of those potential use conditions and how it's going to be used? And understand where those things can result in harm. So maybe you push the wrong button or do something in a sequence that's incorrect, or you have a hidden feature that you didn't think anybody would find. All those things need to be looked at and reviewed. From a test subject perspective, what we're doing nowadays is, most people will say, I need 15 users with a usability test, but you may actually need 4 or 5 different classifications of people. And if you're not considering the right groups, you may actually lend yourself to reduced testing that the FDA says is insufficient. Another thing which I've seen recently with startups is they'll actually use that to build their test bed for marketing and KOLs as they're going forward. So rather than test 15 users, they'll test 75 or 100. Now you've got really good data for the FDA, but you also have 75 to 100 people that said your product's looking good. You now can use that information, leverage it with your investors, and you can keep them on follow-up for potential sales in the future. Other settings for your scenarios, like where are you actually going to do this testing in the future? You're actually going to do a cadaveric study, simulated use conditions. You have to go into clinical trials. So thinking through that stuff early on, you can start to stage that testing and could take some positive steps forward as you're pushing forward. So one of the things we need to consider every time we're working on design is, did we use enough duct tape? Did we come up with everything else that's needed for safety and efficacy within that design? And just make sure that we have what we need in order to be successful. So I know that there's a lot of people in here working on some designs in the past. I just wanted, anybody had a particular concern or something recently that happened, they want to perhaps we just have a quick conversation.
I'm going to say something for packaging, of course, because that's what happened. But your user, you were talking about them coming up with and figuring out what makes it break, what makes it work ruggedly and stuff. I can't even get that data for me to figure out if my 300 hertz that I'm going to get with a truck vibration or drops from about 6 feet or something are going to break the product in a package. So if you don't do it with your product, you're going to have a lot of problems if you state you're going to have your packaging pass. So please do those kinds of tests. It's just a hope.
So I was thinking, in your process, do you encourage your clients to engage with thinking through the rest of the supply chain after the product is designed, DFMs, design for manufacturing strategies, that they're going to learn stuff as it goes into the market, right? Iterations, so they can tweak and not add costs, things like that. Any thought on that and how to address that?
You've got to start the DFM at the very beginning, right? Because if you're not looking at, either what material to make it out of or why to add a certain feature, or an assembly aspect, or maybe even just how do you going to service the product, then you're going to have challenges in the future, which you're going to have challenges no matter what you have anyway. But more and more challenges that drive substantial changes could result in more capital tooling, delays in your supply chain, maybe complaints or recall issues that you've got to deal with. So
I always notice that startups, obviously they're always capital constrained, and so they tend to shortcut a lot of these upfront processes, and that it costs a lot more money to do it right, but it costs 4 times more money not to do it right, but just later. But of course, startups often don't have the money now. So it's really a dilemma. Do you have any experience about how they've handled that, or in terms of, I don't know, I just find that a constant problem.
yeah, well, I think it is a constant problem. It's going to consistently be there. But one of the things that we are seeing more of now is that they're planning a little bit more ahead and understanding some of those things that are actually going to impact them from a cost perspective. So that's a future, hopefully, improvement. But then now what you can do is, with all the 3D printing and other things that you can do as far as machining things out of similar materials, you can create prototypes that are actually pretty rugged and do some early stage testing. And we've been pushing a lot for that to really prove out certain features, because if you don't do that, a substantial issue. Sue?
Yeah, so just from my experience, we submitted to FDA recently, and we're using a product from BD that they've provided, but FDA is asking for information that BD doesn't have because it was grandfathered in. So now we're stuck trying to raise more money to do the testing, and that's an issue.
Yeah, and I think you'll find that the FDA is going to consistently raise the bar. And now also what's occurring is, I think some of the folks that have been around for a while in the FDA, somebody actually mentioned it earlier, they're kind of phasing out because they don't want to adjust to the new audit schemes and things like that. So you have people now that are just learning the process. They don't really understand exactly what needs to be done. And now they're telling us what should be done, even though we've been doing it for 20 years.
And our argument is that it's grandfathered in, but
Now you got a
But
different divide.
they yanked that all the time. Another company I've been working with recently, they were 510K exempt forever, and all of a sudden they said, never mind, you have to file a 510K, and they'd already made like $40 million. Now they have to go backwards, and
So they have to take their product off the market to meet
well, they're no longer able to distribute.
Fantastic. Paul?
Yeah, I just want to make one quick comment. You brought up a really good point about refurb and repair. And this is just a comment. I had a client that made a decision to keep the price low, and if there was a defect, not to return, not to bring the product back and repair it, just reblaze it.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting how they make business decisions, constantly looking at the entire supply chain, right? There's like the art monitor, EBR, the little portable thing that talks to your phone. So it was, cost them 17, 18, they sold it for about 100. And they said, okay, if it's not working, we'll just replace it. But my point is, those level of decisions in the market need to be addressed where you're coming from, right early upfront.
Yeah, but I was talking to somebody, so in the EUMDR, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, it's not whether you're choosing to service it, it's whether the device can actually be serviced. And so you can't make that business decision all the time. If your device can be, isn't that true, or that's what somebody was telling me.
That might be on the sustainability side. There might be some stuff shifting in that direction, but in essence, if you recover it, you bring it in, you're going through the WE process, right, of potentially refurbishing it or recycling it yourselves. You can still choose to throw it in the trash over here or recycle it from other angle.
Like I said,
But it may be shifting.
Yeah, I was just talking to a regulatory person, and I'm like, oh, I'm doing the quality manual and the exceptions. And I'm like, well, they're choosing not to. She goes, oh, no. UMDR, you're going to have to, even if they can service it, you still have to have that procedure in your process. And maybe that's the difference.
Yeah.
You have to have procedure, but you don't have to actually do the service.
Well, and you can't really get away with just throwing it away either, because if you have a complaint, you have to look at it somehow.
Right.
So you gotta have
Oh, there's a whole RMA process, right?
Right.
Yeah.
RMA triage,
Yeah.
then you do the assessment, the inspection, and then there's either refurb, repair, salvage, recycle. I mean, that entire process that's what we do. But my point is, what you're saying is so critical, and to think of that entire supply chain up front is even more critical. And this is just comment.
I want to interject here. For those of you who are not members of MDG Premium, this is the kind of conversation we have on Fridays, where everyone just throws in their expertise, and I know there's a half dozen more comments coming, and you have the time for it, and you were next, Marin. You had your hand raised?
I did. I was just going to follow on with the return aspect, because I think so many companies just think, oh, I'm just going to send it out there. And I worked with a company within the last couple of years, and they had a product that was having significant field issues, and they couldn't even troubleshoot it because they had to put in a biodecontamination procedure in order to bring the product in to get it through so they can look at it. So looking at that life cycle past product shipment is really important.
Yeah, a lot of people will tend to ignore it completely because they're hoping they'll have to service it the first one.
Well, and if you're doing a contract manufacturer, most contract manufacturers don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
So I think the hardest piece of engineering work that I've seen in companies over and over again is if you have a capital goods and you're doing repair procedures, finding the appropriate skill set to write and validate your repair procedures is a really tough thing to find. Because it's completely similar to the manufacturing, but it's not the same thing, and it depends on the equipment you have in place. So you can find people who will do the repairs, but having someone who writes and validates those repair procedures is
It's interesting. That's really interesting because the margins on depot repair service for a contract manufacturer are actually great. If they don't want to do it or don't do it, they're really missing a huge opportunity for the most part.
It's a lot easier to write procedures if you're starting from a nice clean patch
Sure.
of raw material and
Sure.
you're putting it together. Having all these different iterations of devices coming in various states and then having appropriate procedures to make them good again.
Shabir, you were next.
So you mentioned in the bit that the FDA has usability requirements.
Yeah.
For just following question for Ray's question, is there a serviceability requirement?
There's serviceability requirements within like 6601-1 and life cycle and things like that. So if it's electrical, there's definitely stuff in there. I'm not sure, and maybe guess though from a regulation perspective, if you just had a mechanical device, how that would fit in. Anything with electronics in it, there are requirements.
It's a little bit unclear about what the criteria are if you're refurbishing a medical device, right? Because you
The
don't
single-use medical devices have refurbishing facilities, and they've got some pretty stringent requirements.
So Joe and I both worked for defibrillator companies, and defibrillators come in for repairs all the time, but you can't repair them to the original specs because they've already got life on them. So it's kind of the manufacturer's justification of what they think is sufficient testing for sending out a
Yeah,
report.
you've got to
My
come
question
up with
was
some kind of factory acceptance.
my question was more to do with the design itself. Does that have to include serviceability? No.
Well, if you're doing an electrical product, or 6601-1 for electrical product safety, you have to talk about the durability, the reliability, and serviceability. Like product life is in there to some extent. So if you don't explain it, I mean, you can get away with like very short hand on how you get it included when
Well, it depends on what it is.
Using a panel defibrillator or pacemaker.
Oh, maybe, so yes. So that's an electronic device, in fact, very sophisticated, but.
But you would say no serviceability.
Ours were external.
I took the liberty as a bed
Oh,
with slides so you could all get your
Yeah.
QR coded copy of Justin's Amazon best-selling book. Divided as tens of thousands of copies now.
Sure, it's something like
Yep.
Yeah.